Morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of World Edition and Pod and Roku TV on Pod and Roku TV. I greet you today to the show, and I'm wearing an orange tie for a reason today. First, give me 1 second here. Give me 1 second here. I hope everyone is doing well today. And I just had okay. So sorry for that, folks. Welcome to World Edition Pod and Roku TV, and I'm Steve Rao, your host. And I wanted to today, before I begin, just giving you a quick update. I'm here for about 20 minutes today. We'll try to make it to world politics this week. Lots of travel the rest of the year for me. But today, October 2nd, is the celebration of Mohandas K. Gandhi's birthday, October 22nd, 1869. And today we celebrate his birthday. Gandhi was a profound figure in the history of the world. He began his career as a lawyer in South Africa and was not happy with the fact that people of color could not travel on trains, could not travel in the same circles. And so a small group of leaders gathered in South Africa to begin what would go on to become one of the largest civil disobedience and freedom movements in the history of the world. Gandhi would eventually leave South Africa and return to his home country of India, a nation which was learned under British colonial rule. The rest is history. Him and Sardar Patel and Jinnah and Jinnah and all of the different freedom fighters of India and Nehru, Jawaharlal Nehru, banded together and created a civil disobedience movement. All of India started marching with Gandhi. And we all remember the scene in the movie where he put his hand in the ocean and made salt with his own hand, declaring that India was a free and independent nation. My great grandfather actually served in that civil disobedience movement, U. Rama Rao. He was the Speaker of the House in the largest state in India, Tamil Nadu, and his son, Krishna Rao, was the mayor of Chennai, which used to be known as Madras, where my father grew up. As we celebrate Gandhi's birthday, before I get into some world events, just a couple of reminders. I couldn't think of a better person today to remember than Gandhi. Let's not forget that his actions inspired Dr. King, who would later go on in the United States of America to practice the very same movement that Gandhi practiced, civil disobedience. Gandhi taught his followers that you could only change the world by becoming the change that you saw in it. And that's simply what he did, plain and simple. And during these turbulent and divisive times, what Gandhi to me reminds me of, and all of us of, that if we're not happy with our communities, let's take some positive action and do something to make it better. I honestly don't believe that he ever thought the British Empire would leave India, but he did what he thought was the right thing, and he lived his life with purpose for the right reasons. At each mile marker of his march to freedom, their march to freedom, there was ridicule, embarrassment, imprisonment, so many obstacles that he faced along the way, the hunger fasts, the resistance. But through it all, he never lost sight of his finish line. I often wonder what Gandhi would think today, whether he would have known that India would be the world's largest democracy, that India would be the number one economy only in a few years. And yes, it doesn't come without its set of controversies with the recent assassination in Canada of an Indian Sikh, who many claim this assassination is tied to India. With that being aside, I would just say that Gandhi is someone that we will always remember. As Albert Einstein said, we will ponder one day that one such as this, in flesh and blood, walked upon this earth. I'm proud that my legacy of my family has a connection to this great man, and I hope in my continued work as a media guy and also in public service as an elected official, I can continue the work of freedom that my great grandfather and his son Krishna Rao started in India with Gandhi in the 1930s. With that, I want to today take a few moments to have us remember Gandhi and what he means to us. And before we do that, just a couple of things going on in the world. The government shutdown has been averted. Kevin McCarthy's speakership is in jeopardy, and Joe Biden is not happy, President Biden, that Ukraine assistance is not a part of the deal. Ukraine's foreign minister said he did not feel American support for his country had been shattered, but people are worried. And Gavin Newsom, California's governor, has selected LaFonza Butler to serve as the replacement to United States Senator Dianne Feinstein, the senator who just passed away. She's a 44-year-old who runs an organization aimed at electing female supporters of abortion rights and will be the first Black woman, right, or the only Black woman in the Senate. Now, that's about it for today. We're going to come back. Trump is back in court. We're going to talk about that. Let's go ahead and get started. And I say, long live Gandhi, long live India, long live freedom. And let us remember Gandhi today in a few minutes. We're going to go ahead and bring on Mark Lee and a few other guests and just have a quick conversation of Mohandas K. Gandhi, known as the Mahatma or Great Soul. Thank you all, folks. Wasn't really publicized much that his day, the birthday is today, October 2nd. He was assassinated, but when you think of Gandhi today in this world, I'll start with Mark. What do you think? Because oftentimes we don't draw the connection between Indians and Blacks and civil rights, and don't you think that's something that we should be thinking about, especially as we, when we talk about MLK, we should think about Gandhi. When we think about Gandhi, we should think about MLK. Maybe it's a way of connecting these different things together.
Yeah, I mean, Gandhi was definitely an influence in the civil rights movement, particularly around those that were for the nonviolent resistance, like Martin Luther King and a number of others that were in that space. We've actually been airing some videos of people that were not necessarily in that space, but it was great. One of the shows that we've been airing on the rotating events is a debate between Bayard Rustin and between Malcolm X, and they definitely had different views, and part of that was around the whole views around American Muslims and a number of other things, including which direction the country should go in terms of fighting for civil rights. That debate is still raging even today, as there are some people that want to go more of the Black Panther militant route, and there are some that want to go more in the peaceful route and all along those lines. But yeah, we definitely have to remember his connection. I mean, if we're going to be open to discussions and all along those lines. And as you know, Steve, there is some question, and you might know it better than I do, about his role when he was in South Africa, because South Africa was going through apartheid at that time. And there were some people that were thinking that he should have been more active when he was over there in South Africa, meaning Mahatma Gandhi and all along those lines. So I have heard some people that have leveled that criticism against him, because apparently he had some views that some people felt were a little bit out of character to what he is perceived as a man of peace and all along those lines.
Yeah,
But like I said, we are all full of different stories and all different lineages.
And that's an interesting point. And I know Fareed Zakaria talked about this a while back, but what was interesting, and that's a really good point, Mark, and I'm going to go to Nick to get his perspective before we get into some world events and talk about the shutdown. But Gandhi today in India is not as popular as he was, many, many years ago, largely because of the nationalist movement. So the Hindutva, the Hindu nationalism that's going on in India, they almost look at him sometimes as someone that wasn't an Indian hardliner, that, negotiated the separate country, Pakistan, which was the partition in 1947, August 1947. And, he just, I don't know, for whatever reason, I quite can't understand it. But apparently, like in some of the documentaries, and I'm going to have to go listen to that Fareed Zakaria monologue on it that he did before one of his shows. But Gandhi isn't even mentioned as a freedom fighter in some of the Indian movies. And, if there hadn't been a Gandhi, there really wouldn't have been in India. I mean, but Nick, what are your thoughts about Gandhi today as a white American living in the U.S. in a crazy time?
Yeah, well, Steve, we're in a minority, but we don't recognize it in the United States. For example, 66% of the world's population live in the India-China region, And India has 1.6 billion people. We have 300 million. The world has 8 billion people. We have 300 million. So we don't recognize that how big of a population places like India are, the big potential that India has and that region of the world has, because we're fairly well isolated. But that's all changing. You know, supersonic planes are going to be coming back. Right now, when I keep going to India, I'm going, it's a 24-hour flight. It's a bit of a hike. But, you know, that's going to be condensed. So as things change, you're going to see India take bigger part of the stage. And I think they want to, along with China. And there already is the BRICS movement. But the difference between India and China is India is a democratic country, and China is not really. So we actually have more affinity toward India than we do with China right now.
There's critics of India that it's really not as democratic as everyone says. When you look at, for example, you know, the crackdowns on press, the treatment of religious minorities. I mean, I'm trying to play devil's advocate, but there are people.
There are critics everywhere. Okay, I mean, there's critics in the United States. There's critics in China. There are critics. You know, I mean, critics.
Everybody has their critics and everything, but just really quickly, I was curious because you mentioned that and everything, and I did hear an interesting news story. It might have even been featured on one of our stories. I mean, one of our shows on the network yesterday and all. But I was just wondering, do you think some of the pushback that we are getting, and I'm going to mention something that's going on with Gavin Newsom's replacement very shortly and all along those lines, but there are some that are fearing or thinking that even some of the pushback that we're getting now and some of the support for Trump is because there is a lot of folks that will tell you that by 2023, the or even, well, we're in 2023, but in the next few years, the European American population will not be the majority. It will actually be the Latin American and a lot of other populations that will be the majority. So do you think that some of that is the pushback that we are seeing because some people are not ready to give up the power that they have had for hundreds of years?
Yeah, well, I think America is a racist country. I mean, and Newsom is a racist. There's no question. So is Biden. And the reason why is that rather than saying I'm going to choose a senator, it's got to be a black female. I mean, what happens if he came out, Mark, and said, I'm going to choose a senator, it's going to be a white male? Do you think we're going to get any pushback from that? You know, now, see, this is where the Democrats alienate the white population because they make comments like this all the time. Biden did it. He goes, I'm going to choose somebody who's going to be a U.S. senator. Now, doesn't mean that they are underrepresented. Yeah, they're definitely underrepresented. I heard she's the first black female in the Senate. Come on. There should be quite a few of them by now. Half the Senate should be females to begin with. I mean, so it definitely is an underrepresented community, no question about it. But when you make statements like that, I am going to choose a senator, and it's going to be a white male. What is more sexist and racist than that? And Newsom did it.
Well, I mean, there were some people that would argue that that's what has already been the case.
Well, you turn off the white male population.
Decades, the majority of the leadership with older white males, and there was no women, there was no minorities, there were a number of other folks. And I've got a question for Steve as well. Before I get that though, Miss LaFonso Butler is actually the president of Emily's List, which is the organization that Steve was alluding to, and they are a organization that tries to elect Democratic women who support abortion rights. And she was previously an advisor, a senior campaign advisor to Kamala Harris, and has a long history as a labor leader. But one of the other things is, this is even what Newsom said, is that she spent her entire career fighting for women and girls and has been a fierce advocate for working people. He also noted she will make history becoming not just the first African-American, but the first African-American lesbian to openly serve in the U.S. Senate. So apparently this young lady is also out of the LGBTQIA community as well. So he definitely pointed that out even in appointing her. And she used to be apparently the director of public policy at Airbnb. So apparently a lot of people know Airbnb.
You know, I mean, I'm not down to her qualifications. It's just like the Senate, the Supreme Court, the lady that Biden appointed for the Supreme Court, definitely qualified, no question about it. Okay, has nothing to do with that. Here's what I object to. It's the sexist, racist remarks of the Democratic Party. When you make remarks like that, it pushes people like me, who is a white male, toward the Republican Party. Because why do I want to be on a party that's racist and sexist against me? Tell me, why I want to be a member of that party?
I mean,
Okay.
I think part of
No,
it
it's
is
Mark, if they said the Republicans go around saying we're going to appoint people and they're only going to be white males. White females, excuse me.
well, that's what they did for about a
Are
hundred or
you
so
going to
years.
say,
That's why
okay,
the whole
I like
conversation came
white?
around, and that's why there was a pushback against that. Because literally,
Yeah, of course.
the first of the Congress and the first of the political American legacy was exactly what you just said, and that's when people started pushing back, including Dr. King, who was inspired by Gandhi, because they wanted to have a more equitable representation and all along those lines and everything. So, and these debates are not just in the U.S. These whole debates around politics are all over. Because I know that you mentioned recently what was going on with our friends in climate change, and I'm loving this quote that I saw, and I'd love to hear both you and Steve's thoughts around it. But the chief executives of some of the world's largest energy companies are meeting today, and they sought to defend themselves against the various criticisms they're getting, because a lot of people are wanting us to get into the fossil fuel or get away from fossil fuel and all along those lines. And definitely Big Oil has been accused of dialing back in its climate pledges in recent months. And one of the leaders of that, who's actually from Malaysia, Tengku Muhammad Taufik, president and group CEO of Malaysia State Energy from Petronas, was saying that said he was reminded of a famous quote, because a lot of our shows deal with sales and marketing and things around that, Nate. So his quote was, and this is where I want to hear from your thoughts around this, is, so the debate has always been posed here. I'm reminded of an old saying: if you want to keep everyone happy, sell ice cream. We're not in the business of ice cream. And I'm reminded there are people who are lactose intolerant. The indication here is we are to make some tough decisions, and we have to be bonded by facts, nationality, practical steps, but we will get there. So basically saying that, look, they're not in the business of selling ice cream. They're in the business of trying to make money with the product that they have, and all along those lines. So any thoughts about this powerful quote that he gave?
Well, I mean, the thing is, the oil industry says, when the tech industry was creating all these foosball tables and stuff, the oil industry said, we're not in the fun business, we're in the oil business. Right. The good news about the oil industry, we talk about that on one of our shows, is they're in the business to make money. They're in the business to print money. So if you want to invest in energy, because they're very serious about one thing and only one thing. It's making money, and that's kind of it. So it is what it is. I'm surprised that you haven't talked about it's Hispanic Heritage Month or something.
It's Hispanic Heritage Month, and I'm trying to get some guests that will speak to that and all along those lines. And they actually brought that up on Que Pasa Moher on yesterday. They also gave a very positive shout out to Pod TV, because one of the things that Viviana said is that she appreciates the fact that this network gives the voice to the voiceless, because they oftentimes are not given the chance to speak on other platforms. So she actually gave about a 3 or 4 minute monologue where she praised you and Kimberly and the rest of the leadership of said network.
Well, I have an announcement. I'm actually Hispanic. Okay. And I was telling my brother this too, because when my sister's doing our genealogy, right? And she ran up through this royalty track, and the royalty track goes to the Queen of Castile and Leon in Spain, and also the Alfonso I of Portugal. Now, so I did some research on racism. I'm not a big into it. Portuguese are not considered Hispanic. So I go, okay, I got rid of Alfonso I. He's not Hispanic. But Eleanor of Castile and Leon, who's the Queen of Castile and Leon before it was Spain, is Hispanic. So technically, I am Hispanic. So I was telling my wife,
Hispanic, and I think that Kim has claimed some of her native background, and a number of other people claim their background. I was actually going to pivot back to Steve, because one of the things that they brought up in the conversation on Que Pasa Moher, and I've heard it on other shows as well, is that there are a lot of people that are not satisfied all that much with the leadership that exists and all in that space. So hopefully Steve will come back and answer the question, because I do know that a lot of people are, there are 2 folks that are running that are of Hispanic background. They have a Hispanic legacy, and all in that space, that being Vivian Ramaswamy as well as Nikki Haley. And there are some people that are embarrassed by some of the things that they are saying, and that they are not overly happy with them, even as representatives of their culture and all along those lines. So like I said, if Steve, when he gets back, he might have some thoughts around that. But I do know that was a conversation, just like there are folks in the African American community that are not pleased with Tim Scott, Mark Robertson, I believe it is, from here in North Carolina, and a number of others, because we're not a monolithic people. Nobody is monolithic and all in that space. But there are some folks that are feeling that the ultra conservative wings and some of their even conversations that they are spouting are not fair to the larger groups and all in that kind of way. But like I said, that was actually geared toward Steve, and hopefully he'll come back and answer that and everything. I did have a quick question for Sasha since he's joined as well. I got one about Ukraine and all along those lines. But before I get to Ukraine, I was going to ask you about the market, because, you know, there was this whole government shutdown that people were talking about and what it would do to the market. And apparently the market is not quite responding, as it is my understanding, but definitely clarifying if I'm wrong, correct me, the way that people thought. Because I think that people were expecting like a big jump after we averted this crisis, but apparently we just put it on a 45-day stall. And when I looked at the news today, folks were like, well, you know, they were expecting a big spike, a lot of trade, and apparently it's starting off a little bit slow. But you're in the market and the market study. So were you surprised that it didn't have a great reaction the way that some of these media pundits were, or was this what you expected?
My stocks are all up today.
Okay.
That's very important. And of course, it's very difficult to time, because for seasonal considerations, market is supposedly should be weak. It was weak a few days last week, for example. It recovered nicely. But again, leadership is now coming back to tech stocks. You know, their names. I will tell you more about it on our financial show, Modern Investing, on Wednesday. And we'll take a good look at market leaders, market laggards, and options trading, and many other things. Now, anybody will explain what's happened with what's his name, House Leader
McCarthy.
McCarthy.
I think there's a motion on the floor.
What it's all about.
Well, I think I don't know the details of this, but what I'm hearing is that there's been a motion. I can't remember the name of the congressman, but to oust him because he's not, because he was willing to work to get the budget passed, and there was a real standoff on. I think eventually they got the Ukraine assistance out of it, but just the fact that he was wanting to work with the other side, I think they just said he's not MAGA enough, and so they're trying to get rid of him. And God, I mean, think about that, putting someone in more conservative than Kevin McCarthy. I mean,
Gates is an idiot. Okay, let's get real. This guy Gates, unfortunately, is from my state of Florida, where I'm originally from. But the guy's a complete moron. I mean, shutting down the government over and over again does not solve the problem of a budget that's out of control. So the only person out of control is Gates and his weirdos that are now mobilizing against McCarthy. And he should be given no press, no credence whatsoever. He should be admonished and, frankly, thrown out of office by the people in the state of Florida. The real heroes here. There's a problem-solving caucus, Steve, in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, Wiley Nichols on there.
What?
Wiley Nichols serves on that. We're going to bring him on this week.
Okay, I have total admiration for those guys. You know why? Because that's what you're doing when you're running a business. You're solving problems. Running a government, you're solving problems. Problem solvers are valuable. Garbage like Gates and some of these people are not valuable in any organization and should be tossed. But the problem-solving caucus, I didn't know Wiley was part of it, because that's what they really need to do in Washington. There's a lot of problems in the United States, and they need to get together and solve them. Throwing out the Speaker of the House, who is solving a problem, those people that are doing it are a problem. They need to be tossed. One problem they brought up is Ukraine.
And I was actually going to get to that, because
and this is something on our show I kept saying, you guys got to be prepared to go at it without the United States. I mean, the U.S. is not a reliable ally when it comes to the war, so they need to stockpile as much weapons from wherever they can get it. And look at, they're continually, try to get support from the United States. But we're not we've been proven over and over again not to be a reliable ally, period.
Nick,
We're gonna
you will be forced to become a very reliable partner. You'll see.
Yeah, when they're on our doorstep.
You will be forced. There will be no way out. And I'll tell you why. Because replace a word Ukraine with the word US. Without Ukrainian victory in this war, there will be no US as you know it. It will be some kind of a landmass with half idiots living in there without any political will, without any future. It will become slowly a second and then third world country. And you will lose all the attributes of leadership. And if, as Honorable David Walker is asking whether US will be superpower by 2040, it's not going to be there even by 2025. I'll tell you that. You have to replace in your thinking Ukraine with US. US is helping not Ukraine itself. US is helping itself and its European allies.
It's actually along those same lines. I was just wondering, because I did see that the EU, and sometimes we give the EU a hard time and all along those lines, but the leader of that area, the primary EU minister, or one of them, the foreign minister, actually made a surprise visit to Kiev. So maybe they're going to get some support from the EU, but it also looks like a major supporting area, or an area that they might have been hoping for support, has the election has actually gone toward a Putin sympathizer, that being Slovakia. So that is going on, and apparently Poland's concerned about its own borders because they're having some border issues, just like the US has border issues as well. But I was just wondering your thoughts around these kind of developments, because a lot of any war is a chess match, and that's what is going on in addition to
listen,
body count.
I think that in Slovakia, whoever won this election, I don't remember his name or your name or its name. I don't think it's a very important
Robert Fico.
event because obviously he won or her won, him, right? So
it's him, Robert Fico.
Okay, very good. He won the election not because of his stance of not supporting Ukraine. There were several other reasons in play why he won the election. Good for him. Now, Slovakia is a very minor player in all this region. Economically, by number of population there, it's not a really event that we have to be worried about. And what will be his real politics? He won the election, and very often people who win election, when they become into power, they change a lot of things, what they were talking into something else. So we'll see how it will develop, but it cannot. By the way, Slovakia was really supportive of Ukraine, and they gave almost all their weapons that they had. They already gave it to Ukraine. I don't think that they can continue to give anything to Ukraine because they're out of any weapons or ammunition or anything. I think that's not such a big event at all.
No, yeah, I hear you. And along those same lines, because many moons ago, actually when I was an infant, I used to live in Turkey. My dad was stationed in the Air Force and all along those lines. And I did see that there was a major airstrike against the Kurdish militants over there in Ankara, all in that space. And Erdogan, and I know Erdogan had some thoughts around the Ukraine-Russia war as well, said that terrorists will never achieve their goals. So we're having terrorist attacks all over the world and everything. So I was just wondering folks' thoughts about these terrorist attacks, not just in the Ukraine area, but also in Turkey and a number of other places. And will this maybe even change their conversation? Because I know there was times that they were playing a certain role within the Ukraine-Russia war as well. But I did see this about the Turkish attack, the airstrike against the Kurdish militants. And we know that there are oftentimes militants in various countries. So what would this do on the geopolitical stage? And this is for anybody.
Russia is behind any events in the last several years to destabilize the whole world, especially Western countries, and it behind the first of all their war against Chechnya for several years. Actually, there were two wars, if not three. They were behind attack on Georgia, later on Ukraine, Syria, Ukraine now again, and several other killings around the world. What Russia brings to the world today? Number one, fear. Number two, death. Number three, prostitution. Number four, corruption. Number five, all kind of weapons. This is what Russia brings to the world. Full stop, period. Anybody will say that, no, Sasha, you're not right. They're bringing something else. What is that? Shaquille, maybe you know.
I'm sorry, Sasha. I've just arrived, so I'm not sure what it was that you're actually talking about. Sorry, but
Okay.
Okay,
Let me repeat.
but
Shaquille.
we do have some interesting news from Australia. Sorry, Sasha, were you going to say something? Sorry, continue.
Yeah, just because maybe you didn't hear properly what I said. What I said was what Russia brings today in the world. Number one, fear. Number two, death. Number three, killings. Number four, corruption. Number five, prostitution. Although maybe four prostitution, five corruption. But you can interchange that.
Yeah,
That
and I guess
what Russia brings to the world. Does the world need Russia? You tell me.
well, and
No.
just to catch Shaquille, just to catch you up and everything along those lines, I was actually just talking about the Turkish airstrikes that are going on against the Kurdish militants and all along those lines. And when I brought it up,
Russia behind
Tasha
that.
brought up the fact that this was under the mastermind of the Russian government, and maybe it wasn't the militants, but it was the Russians that were actually behind this and all along that line. He was also pointing out the other parts of the world where Russia has been kind of manipulating what's going on, whether that's Africa, whether
Russia
that's
is
Latin
in Africa. Russia is in Caucasus. Russia finally got kicked out of Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict. Now they're going to solve everything by themselves without Russia. Russia is being kicked out of everywhere. That's a reality.
Yeah, no, but Sasha, if I can play devil's advocate, and maybe Shaquille jump in on the conversation on this as well.
I'm not playing
There are
devil's
those-
advocate on this. I know nothing about Russia and the Ukraine. I take Sasha's advice on it, but I'm certainly not getting involved in that conflict. I'm not taking any political position or otherwise on that conflict. And when this conflict first started, I said very clearly, I hope that there is a quick resolution and that human lives are not unnecessarily lost. And I maintain that position. Past that, I'm sorry, I know nothing about the region. I know nothing about the geopolitics. I'm not getting involved.
Okay,
No, fair
there
enough.
were so many lives already lost that there is no need for a peaceful solution anymore. It's now complete victory of Ukraine. It's complete demise of Russia. That's what's in cards. Now we have to finish this 80 years of scare of thermonuclear attacks and all this garbage. It has to be gone. We don't want our children and grandchildren to live in this type of world. Finish. Enough.
No,
Sasha, I don't. Hang on, Mark. Sasha, and we discussed this when we met in person. I don't disagree with you at all. I appreciate what you're saying, but what do I do for a living? I trade interest rate derivatives. I trade options over shares. I don't think it's really appropriate for me to weigh in on this, and I'm very happy to be advised by you on what should happen over in that part of the world. Now, I would like to say I've come on today because I'd like to remind everybody that I am a white supremacist and I am a racist. So Australia is currently having or about to have a referendum, and the referendum is about whether the First Nations people of Australia, not a term that we ever used before the Americans came up with it, but we'll go with that, whether the First Nations people of Australia should have what's called a voice to Parliament. It's not, and look, I might be a dumbass, which is fair enough, but it's not very clear what that's going to mean. They're going to change our constitution, but it's really unclear as to actually what powers this so-called voice is going to have. And so the referendum is it 2 weeks from now? A week and a half?
Yeah.
2 weeks?
2 weeks.
So I don't want to vote no to it.
Yeah, Shaquille, as I'm going to just say that I heard a little bit about what's going on there, but I defer to you because you live there and everything. But what is the nature of the what is the nature of the referendum? What are they actually asking for in the referendum? Because I mean, there was this whole conversation about making sure that like the African Americans had votes, and that's why there are now more congressmen here that are African Americans than used to be. And we were actually talking earlier about Gavin Newsom, a lesbian African American woman, to feel.
Well, believe it or not, this has nothing to do with African Americans. I know they'll be quite upsetting for you, but it's the native people. Okay, so if I can continue, so we have a referendum coming up. It'll be in less than 2 weeks from now. And Australia has to decide whether to have a constitutional amendment or a constitutional change. And on the surface, it sounds great. It sounds like they're just going to recognise our First Nations people as actually being First Nations people. Australia has a very bad record and a very bad reputation internationally for not recognising our First Nations people. And there's been a number of High Court cases about this. There's been a number of things that have gone on. So they've brought out this voice. And what the voice is supposed to do, as best as I can tell, is it's supposed to be a mechanism for Indigenous people to be able to talk to Parliament about policies that might affect them. The problem with it is that, from the No campaign, is that we're not sure how this mechanism is actually going to work. And what they're telling us is that Parliament will actually determine what its powers are and what influence it can actually have and what its makeup is. So there's a lot of people who are saying, well, I support it being recognised. I support the Indigenous people of Australia being recognised, but like, we kind of want to know that this is actually going to fix the problem, and we're concerned that it may not.
And that's what I'm.
And what we've seen, please, Mark, please. What we've seen in this country is the Yes campaign. So vote yes to have the voice introduced. We've seen them give death threats, for example, to high-profile Indigenous people who are promoting saying no. And that, to me, I don't go for that. If you've got a good political argument and you think that you can win somebody over, or you think that somebody should vote the way that you want them to vote, you don't need to threaten them or their children with death threats or anything like that. And this has, I think, really hurt that campaign. But in any case, so I went to a Yes campaign rally and talk a handful of days ago because I wanted to hear what the arguments were for the Yes campaign. I also went to a No campaign rally tonight, and I got this hat. Now, I'm not wearing the hat because I'm not promoting it, okay? And I got this Vote No shirt, which, again, I'm not wearing because I'm not voting for it, right? Vote No to the division if you can't see the rest of it. Vote No to the division. Now, I'm not taking a position on this at all because I want to know all the information right up until the time that I'm going to vote, and I'll decide, and I'll just make the best decision that I can. But I must say, it was fascinating for me that when I went to the Yes campaign to listen and hear what the Yes campaign had to say about these issues, nobody threatened me. Nobody called me names. But today, when I went to a No campaign rally to hear what the No campaign was saying, led by two very high-profile Indigenous people in Australia, I was called just as I was walking in with no shirts, no labels on me, just walking in my normal casual clothes. I was told that I was a racist, I was a skinhead, I was a traitor to my skin color. And I thought, well, that's really fascinating, isn't it? Because here I am. We have a major constitutional change which is being suggested, and you won't even let me hear the arguments for both sides without calling me names. And when you do that, all you do is really annoy the moderates, the people that may well have voted on your side. You annoy them, you upset them, you don't get them to say, yeah, you're right, I'm a racist, I'm going to vote for your side. What you do is you piss them off and they go, you know what? Even if I agree with you, I'm not going to vote for your side because you're so toxic. And what I will say to you guys there in America is that's exactly what your politics does as well. So maybe we could just have some proper, normal conversations. We can discuss the issues. And when we don't agree, there could just be a little bit of respect, a little bit of, you know what? I don't really agree with you. You don't really agree with me, but let's continue to talk about it. And I'm not going to call your names. And that is what has led to the dramatic division politically around the Western world. And while we divide ourselves on these issues, countries which are not so friendly to us are united. So we should really pull our heads in. Mark, over to you.
Shaquille, hold on a second. Shaquille, one thing I was going to say that I've seen that literally on the other side as well, because I have a friend of mine that is very much on the left. Some people would even say that he might even be farther to the left than y'all think that I am, and all along those lines. And that being said, that he has gone to some of very conservative churches and was actually criticized and attacked as soon as he walked in the door, much like you were, because he will wear some very interesting jewelry and some very interesting things. He is not a member, as best I can tell, of the LGBTQI community, but he definitely supports them. And literally, I saw one time that he walked into the church and they literally switched the congregation or the message, the sermon, because they were feeling that he did not belong. So he was attacked from that.
I don't think that is in any way the same thing as what I'm saying. I'm telling you that if I'm in the United States and I'm not American, as you rightly know, if Sasha and I are in the United States and I say, Sasha, the Republicans are having a rally. Donald Trump's having a rally. Let's go and see it. But next week Biden's having a rally. Let's go see that. Let's just see what's going on in America. Like we don't know, right? And one side attacks us for being racist. And we're just here to find out like what the arguments are. And the other side doesn't. We're going to walk away and go, look, I'm not really sure that I agree with the side that doesn't attack us, but they seem like reasonable people. This is the problem. Attacking people who don't even have a position, attacking people that don't even have a position is a really bad idea. You just try to use this. Hang on, Mark, I'm responding. Mark, I'm responding to you. You just tried to use an example of somebody who was wearing LGBTQ gear into a church.
He had a ring on.
Okay.
Wearing a ring.
But he's worn that. Well, this is not
LGBTQ on him. He didn't even say that he was supporting LGBTQ, but the pastor of that particular church, a reactionary or a conservative church, saw him coming to the room, and he was coming there to do what you were doing. He's coming to hear the other side and to hear what they were saying, so he could learn from the other side. This may surprise emails from Donald Trump. I get emails from a number of other people because I want to hear the other side.
Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining, right? You started that off. You started that off. Mark, you started it off by bringing up the LGBTQ issues. Now you're just saying, "Oh, if I were bringing," I'll tell you what. If I wear my diamond ring into a church, which I have done many times through the South, through the North, through the East and the West of the United States, I've never had a church pastor say, I'm going to change the sermon because Shaquille's wearing a diamond ring. So clearly there was an LGBTQ slant to this, which the church didn't agree with. Okay, so don't try and like change the goalpost.
Shaquille, listen to me. The ring that have nothing to do. He was wearing an earring and he was wearing no shirt that had any stance on it. He came into the space and everything. The pastor literally changed the sermon when he walked in the door.
Were you there?
That particular time, no, but I was there when he's been in other places as well. So,
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't
All right. Well, maybe your friends. Well, maybe your friend's a little delicate flower. I don't know, right? If somebody has a whinge at me, right? If I met with Sasha up in Toronto, and I felt like Sasha's friends didn't like me very much, I'm not going to walk away and go, "Oh, Sasha's friends are racist." I'm just going, "Hey, Sasha, fuck you and fuck your mates. I'm off." Right? Like, I'm not going to sit there and be all upset and offended.
Well, I mean, that's basically what he did because he's very much a strong person, and I'm hoping that we'll get
Well, maybe.
on the show, and he can actually tell you about that
maybe,
and
Mark.
other things that happened as well. But like
Well,
I said,
maybe, Mark, maybe ask you.
Just like the Irish conflict with the English, I think that a lot of times people get very much offended, and I think that
Well, let me just tell you. Let me tell you. You can bring up the Irish and the British and the Protestants and the Catholics and all the rest of it till the cows come home. Let me just tell you, the United States, a great country, fought in World War II, fought in World War I, totally screwed up Vietnam, totally screwed up Afghanistan, but at least your country had some balls. Maybe the United States might consider teaching your kids today not to be such bloody pansies and getting their knickers in a knot every time somebody says something that just upsets them. Okay? Can you imagine, Sasha? So, look, I know you don't like Russia, but can you imagine a Russian army infantryman saying, "Oh my God, that person called me by the wrong pronoun"? I don't think so. Can you imagine a Ukrainian doing it? Or a Frenchman, or maybe the French would. But, can you imagine the military of any country that is hostile to us whinging and moaning like a bunch of 12-year-old girls that just realised for the first time they don't just piss yellow, right? Can you imagine them doing that? I don't think so.
I mean, Sasha says regularly that he doesn't think. He just said it earlier today, and you said you didn't want to make a comment to it. He basically said that he can't see anything good about any current Russian, and I get that.
Mark, that's fine. That's absolutely fine.
Why isn't
again? Do you think that Sasha's comment is having an effect on the Russian military? If Sasha sits there and says the Russian military are a bunch of whining little bitches.
He says that.
Do you think the Russian military? Let me finish my question. Do you think that the Russian military is sitting there going, "Oh, Sasha said that I was a whiny little bitch, and I'm so offended, and he got my pronouns wrong"? Do you think that's what's going on? Of course not. So maybe we in the West, especially you guys in America, should teach the kids to have a little bit more intestinal fortitude and stop whinging and moaning about the most pathetic little emotional slights. How's that sound?
They only moan about their own problems. Let me tell you what happened recently in the United States. There's a governor in the state you love, California, called Newsom, right? He gets on national news, just like Joe Biden did, and said, "I'm going to appoint a senator. It's going to be a black female." Now, let me tell you something about the white male, because he just knocked me twice. He goes, "No white males," basically. I should be offended. So should the press. Now, what happens if he got up in front of the national press and said, "I'm going to appoint a senator. It's going to be a white male"? You would hear the liberals go crazy. You're a sexist and you're a racist, right? And they would be right.
But I mean, right now we're in the tick the box culture and everything. Hold on a second, Nick. Right now we're in the tick the box culture because he's literally trying to tick several boxes. He wasn't just trying to tick the black box. He was trying to tick the women box, and he was also trying to tick the LGBT.
Now, I'm
saying that is across the board.
I agree with
you. Do that.
And by the way, I am.
Republican and the Democratic
I'm
side.
starting, and so is a lot of people like me, leaning toward Republican for this reason. When you get somebody who gets in front, and it's been Biden and Newsom saying, "I'm going to appoint somebody, it's going to be black female, and no white male," no matter how good we are, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Because I'm a racist and sexist, and I'm looking at Fox. I'm sorry. I'm going to go look at Republican Party.
You know what? Nick, this is exactly the point, and this is why people like myself.
But I'm not going to.
This is the reason. This is the reason why people like myself are politically homeless. People like myself who are ordinary liberals, okay, because I've never been a conservative, can only find a home with conservatives because I don't think that race and gender and sexuality and colour should matter. And all of a sudden it does. And that's exactly, look, Nick, you and I are friends on air and off air. We're friends. We're not friends because you're white. I'm not friends with you because you're white. This is exactly the problem. And for as long as this continues, we continue in the West to weaken ourselves. And we need to put an end to it. We need to sit there and say, look, enough. Enough. We're either all going in the same direction or we're not.
Hold on. You said, and hold on one second, because I've actually got another question I was going to ask earlier, because you're the economic person, as is Sasha, and I don't understand economics. I'll say that I don't understand economics. There's things that I don't understand, then I will admit those things. So I did have a question I was curious about, because apparently in the UK, and maybe this has a representation matter as well, they are raising the national living wage to 11 pounds. I've never been to London. I have not done as much traveling as anybody on this panel, and I will admit that, and all along those lines. So that being said, what is 11 pounds and how does that compare to the American minimum wage? Because I'm going like, is 11 pounds a major increase or whatever?
It's not even relevant because you can raise things and lower them and it doesn't really make much of a difference. It really doesn't. Okay? What you're going to do is you're going to price some people at the lower end of the economic scale out of a job. At the same time, it's the same thing you have in the United States, okay? At the same time, you're going to make some industries so much more expensive that they can't compete internationally. If you want to have a higher wage, you're going to have to mandate that Americans or British people, if you're going to do it in the UK, you're going to have to mandate that they buy locally made goods, or you're going to have to put a protective tariff or some other type of protection in to protect those industries against competition from other markets.
Well,
look, nobody in the West. Let me finish. Mark, let me finish. Nobody in the West. I know you want to think that I'm some capitalist, heartless pig. Nobody in the West wants to see people earning a wage that they can't survive on. Nobody wants to see poverty. Nobody wants to see people going without having a hard life. That's not what people are trying to do. But when you arbitrarily increase the price of one good, which is labor in this case, without increasing the cost of the goods produced or increasing the amount people will pay for things, where do you think the money's going to come from?
No,
this has always been a fight. Unions and everybody else have fought about this.
Hold on a second, because I'm trying to get an understanding, and I'm sure others that are watching are trying to get the same understanding. For those that do not understand pound to dollar conversion, that's the question I asked, what is $11 an hour, 11 pounds an hour equal to? Because that's what he's saying is the national living wage going to be. They're going to rise it to 11 pounds an hour.
11 pounds to US dollars is about $15, but that's not even a comparison. What you want to go with is power purchasing parity, okay? And the thing with PPP, again, you can't take a national average. You guys are sitting there in North Carolina, okay? What you guys, if I was to pay you, Mark, if you came work for me and I paid you $25 an hour in North Carolina, that might be a reasonable wage. You might actually be able to survive and have a decent life on that. But you're not going to be able to have a decent life in inner city New York or LA because things are so much more expensive. So again, with UK, hang on. So again, with the UK, what are we talking about? You want to have a national minimum wage of £11? So somebody who's working in inner city London, somebody who's working in inner city London is on £11, and somebody who's living in rural northern England's on the same thing. Look, when I stayed at the presidential suite at the Park Lane Mayfair, Hilton Hotel in Park Lane Mayfair, I said to the doorman, I said, hey, where do you guys drink? Because I was sick and tired of being in this big room by myself. So I said, hey, where do you guys drink? He goes, oh, we normally just drink around the corner there. So I went to the bar with him. I went to the bar, waited for him. He came down. Let's have a drink. And so I shouted him and most of the staff that work at the hotel a drink. And they said, why would somebody like you even bother hanging out with us? It's quite classist in the UK. I said, mate, we're Australian. We don't give a shit about class. And he goes, well, but you're staying in the presidential suite. I said, what's that going to do with anything? And he said, well, what it cost you to stay in that room for one night is how much we earn for a year.
Yeah,
I was horrified.
Yeah,
I was
I've only been-
horrified. Just bear with me. Just bear with me. I was absolutely horrified to find that out because I cannot understand how anybody could survive working in London on the wage that they told me they were earning. But again, you might make the argument. You might make the argument. Let me finish. You might make the argument. Let me finish, please. Let me finish. Let me finish. Let me finish. You might make the argument that they should get paid more. I appreciate that. But having a national minimum increase means that the bed and breakfast run by mum and dad that might have 3 or 4 people come through there every couple of days is also going to have to increase their wages to that level. And they might have a part-timer that's semi-retired that says, oh, look, I'm happy to have a lower wage because I just want to get out of the house and work. And all of a sudden you deny them that opportunity because you made there be a national minimum wage. And that's the harm that you cause that you never want to acknowledge.
No, but both in that, because we're going to wind down, in both in that conversation as well as the conversation in the U.S., because this is part of what we averted the government shutdown with. They are talking about cutting government staff and even government departments. I think that that's part of the argument that Vivek and others have made and everything. So this notion of government waste is a big conversation around the world. So I don't know if you or Nick or anybody else had any thoughts around that, because that's the other thing he said was he was going to cut the government staff. I think Vivek said he was going to get rid of entire departments, including like, I think.
Well, look, I'm not American, Mark, so I'm not going to weigh in too much on your politics. I never really have weighed in too much on your politics, other than to say how disappointed I am and other people in the West in how the American government has frittered away the money and the affluence and the power and influence that the rest of the Western countries of the world have bestowed upon the US government. But if there is anything the US government's doing, from shutdowns to the power of the purse, that's going to curtail the incredible amount of waste that goes on in your government, I'm all for it. I'm not a citizen of your country, but I love your country, I respect your country, and I think that it'll make your country a lot better and a lot more powerful. And I'll leave the last note to Sasha. Sasha, tell me, the speaker of your house has resigned because of some nonsense that wonderful Trudeau did by bringing a Nazi into Parliament. Do you have any comments for us about that?
Well, at first, when I heard about that, I've dismissed it as a basically stupid mistake that innocently happened and so on. But then I started to look farther into it, and it raises a lot of very uncomfortable questions about what's the mechanics of that actually happened. What was the reaction of different people of different level of government? The poor guy, the speaker, resigned, and that's the best what he could have done. What is it Trudeau's responsibility, though? That's quite unclear. He's trying to put a good face on himself, as he usually does, but I don't think...
No, he's not getting a good
face. He was a great speaker. He was a great speaker, Sasha, and Trudeau should take some responsibility because he was a great speaker. You know that I'm not on the side of the Canadian Liberals. I've never been on the side of Canadian Liberals in recent times, but that speaker was a great guy. He was very fair, and Trudeau should have taken some responsibility. Mark, can you send me the link in the chat window, please, for economics?
I'll do that and everything just really quickly, and we can talk about this on tomorrow. There was a climate change story that was out there as well, and I'm sure that Shaquille may have thoughts about this, and maybe we'll talk about it tomorrow. But apparently their dolphins are being threatened, and not the football team, because of the mass deaths of dolphins in the Brazilian Amazon, as apparently the water temperature is rising by 40 degrees. So people are blaming that on our lovely weather and the change in the weather. So this is something that I'm sure the climate change activists will be jumping on, and all along those lines.
Well, they should. They should get upset, really, Mark, about the extreme left wing communists and protesters, and whether their health might be imperiled because of the increase in the temperature of my temper with their bullshit.
Well, like I said, that could be the case. On a sadder note, and I'll leave on this one. Our condolences do go out to the folks in Spain. Apparently, there was a major nightclub fire in that area, and there were lives lost. And it was like one of those fires. I don't think there was a terrorist fire, from what I am understanding, but I'm sure that there'll be investigations. And apparently, that took place over this weekend in what Spain is calling its deadliest nightclub fire in decades, as rescuers are searching for more victims. So yeah, even when you go out to the nightclub,
I need that link, please, Mark.
Yeah, I'm going to get that link to you, and all along those lines. So yeah, I'm going to get that
Thank
link.
you.
No problem. And we're going to get on out of here so that everybody can get to the economic show. Hopefully David Walker will be there. And we also have the media show at Monday as well. We do have a guest tomorrow. I think it's a guest in either the economics or the health space. But if you follow the links that I send out, you'll see who the guest is, because I put that at the bottom of the said link. But we're going to get on out of here. And of course, tomorrow we've also got the episode of this week, of one of two episodes of Ukraine, Russia, and China. And I was actually going to get into a large conversation around the number of that as well, but we didn't get to it today. So hopefully we'll get to it, some of that tomorrow or during the course of the week. But look forward to seeing you, Sasha, as well as other folks on the show in the near future, as in tomorrow. So we're going to get on out of here.